This is Eyewitness News up close with Bill Ritter.
I'm over the moon about the change in the law.
The homeowner who was arrested after confronting an accused squatter now speaking out after our series of investigative reports leads to huge changes in the law of New York State. But the homeowner's problems are still not over. Turns out the accused squatter rented the home out to other people who are still there. Talk about a mess. We have an update from investigative reporter Dan Kraut. But first, anti-war and pro-Palestinian protests on college campuses in our area and now across the country. Columbia was the center of it. New York cops arresting more than 200 people at protests in the last week. We talked to New York Mayor Eric Adams about that, the new budget he unveiled, the city's economy, crime, and a lot more. And good morning, everyone. Welcome to Up Close. I'm Bill Ritter. A divided New York. That's what the growing number of protests have created. The demonstrations started at Columbia University. They've spread across the city, across the country. The NYPD called to action by the colleges themselves in New York City. This division in this city has grown larger for so many reasons, from anti-Semitism, the linkage with terrorist groups, to the role of the police. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez criticizing Columbia for calling the NYPD and the rest that followed. And the Speaker of the House of Representatives, coming from Washington to Manhattan, says he's ready to call out the National Guard. What is going on? Well, with some answers. The 110th Mayor of New York. This morning we welcome Mayor Eric Adams. Mayor, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you.
Before
you. Great to be on.
Well, it's great to have you. Before we get into all the weeds of this, let me talk about the bigger picture here. Being against the war and for a ceasefire, all very noble, and it's what most of the world wants, and I believe, without doing a scientific study on it, that most people in New York want that. But the protests seem to have other things by a smaller group in mind. As you look at what's happening here and the division that this has created, what's your message? What are you feeling about all this?
Well, first, we should be really clear. There are 8.3 million New Yorkers. And the voices of those who say they celebrate Hamas, who call for the extinction of the Jewish people, who are using many derogatory terms, they're not in alignment with New Yorkers. This is a city where hate has no place. We don't care if it's Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, anti-Sikhism, against groups because of their language or ethnicity. It's not a place here. And I think that those disgusting terminologies are really hurting anyone who stated that they're standing up for something, and that's not how you stand up for it. I have protested before during the South Africa dismantling of apartheid. I know what it is to protest. This type of calling yourself protest, I think, has been infiltrated by outside agitators and professional agitators. Is hurting what people are attempting to say.
Well, the image is very strong, what we see on our air every night, and we don't get everyone's opinion there. There's no question. You know, one of the things that I have thought about when I've watched all this is it makes me think about your time as borough president of Brooklyn. And when there were problems, hateful problems, you would bring everyone together of different religious bents and get them together and say, how do we solve this? We have more things alike with each other than different. How do we make this happen? Have you thought about doing that as mayor with what's going on right now?
And we have a great deal of things are happening off camera and out of the view of the public. I had a meeting today, a large meeting with a group of Jewish leaders. I've been having a meeting with Sikh leaders, African American clergy. We have been meeting behind the scene. And we need to be clear. This is a protest that we have never witnessed before in our city. Throughout the years of not only protesting but protecting protesters, I have never witnessed the type of hateful, harmful, painful terminology that we're witnessing right now. I cannot recall any time in the period of protesting that we call for the eradication or extinction of any particular group. I say to all groups, just replace the word Jewish and put the word African American, Sikh, Hispanic, Dominican. To hear someone call for the harm of a group, we have never witnessed that in our city, and that is why I think we need to dig deep, and you're going to find these are professional outside agitators, I believe, that's carrying out this action.
We know there are a lot of people. I remember back in the days when we were all, not all of us, many of us were protesting the war in Vietnam. The call was, oh, they're just a bunch of outside agitators, but they weren't that. So what do you do about that? And what about a bigger kind of meeting where we talk about no more hate? We talk about we're in favor of not having war anywhere. And yet these two groups in the Middle East are setting the tone for all this, because not everyone backs Hamas. Certainly a majority backs Hamas. And more people are very much sympathetic to some of the plights for the Palestinian people. Why not a summit here led by the mayor?
Well, the first thing we have to do is meet the groups independently and individually, because everyone has a concern that's specific for their community, and then there's the overall community of hate has no place here. And so I don't know if part of your task is to be a mind reader, because you read the minds of those who are coming together. We are going to first, we've been having these individual meetings that really stemmed after October 7th, and now we need to bring all of those groups together, because we can show the entire country how we do not allow hate to find a footing in our country. And I can tell you something, one of the most dangerous aspects of this is, again, social media. Social media is putting out a great deal of hateful rhetoric that many of our young people are seeing and not really digging into the truth. The days are gone when you sit down with the family and watch the 5 o'clock, 6 p.m. news and get some real semblance of honesty. We're dealing with a different animal right now, and we have to fight against it.
Okay. Keep us posted, Mr. Mayor, when something happens, because I think this is the key to this, and I appreciate you taking time to talk about it. We have a lot of other things to talk about, and I want to begin with the budget you just had passed, and I wanted to get your take on all this. All of a sudden, rather than cutting back many of these services, and you did cut back some, and I want to talk to you about that, but rather than have these 5% cutbacks that you talked about in the fall, we're not having that, and suddenly we have a booming economy. What changed in your mind?
Well, number one, the tax revenues were better than what we expected. But when we predict, let's go back to January 1st, 2022, I immediately saw that there was a lot of uncertainty that we felt was on the horizon, and all the experts felt that. So we immediately put in efficiencies where we told the agencies to cut back on their costs of services to make sure we could find efficiencies. And thank God we did that, because little did we know, we thought COVID was our problem. Little did we know we were going to get 191 migrants and asylum seekers with a $4 billion price tag. If we didn't take those steps in the beginning, we would be having a different conversation right now. We saved over $7.2 billion we found in efficiencies. And then we did what was smart. We brought down a 30% decrease in the cost of the migrants and asylum seekers. We got a great deal out to be self-sufficient, over 65% to be self-sufficient, about 30-day initiative. And so all of those smart decisions, that is why independent financial experts looked at us and said we made the tough choices, and now this city is seeing the benefit of those tough choices.
Would you say that the migrant crisis is no longer a crisis?
Oh, no, far from it. Just last week, I think we got roughly 1,600. We're still seeing buses come in. We're seeing planes come in. We have learned to manage it better because, you know, anytime you're dealing with an emergency situation, I always use the analogy, if your pipes burst in your basement and you have to call a plumber 2 a.m. in the evening, he's going to charge you that 2 a.m. price. Yeah. And so we have learned to manage it better, bring down the cost, but we're still dealing with the crisis. But not one child or family is sleeping on the streets of the city of New York, unlike other municipalities. No layoff, no tax increases. You're seeing our budget director, Jihad, has managed this crisis with our team very well.
Let me talk about a couple of things that you did cut. More than $50 million in the budgets for the libraries in New York City, which are, you know, maybe the best in the country. That's what they would say anyway. And you're cutting the composting program, which was only $7 million, which has been very popular.
I have not found one agency thus far when I said we have to cut a program, no one volunteered and raised their hands. Trust me, no matter where you do efficiencies, there are going to be those that say, no, you can't do it. It has to maintain with the community. We inputted a citywide composting program that is going to do differently than what the community composting program is. So we don't need a duplication. That's how you save money. And when it comes down to the libraries, we need to be clear. The city of New York did not tell libraries to close their libraries Saturdays and Sundays. We told all the agencies and all the entities, we have to find efficiencies. You determine where you want to find the efficiencies. If I had to make that determination, I would not be closing libraries. As you stated, they're crucial to our community. And these negotiations are continuing. Yep. We're going to sit down with the city council and come to an agreement like Adrian and I have done 2 times before. The speaker is a partner, and we will come to a conclusion.
Okay. So it's not done deal yet, but it's heading that direction. I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor. Let's talk about congestion pricing, because on Friday they announced, yes, we're going ahead starting on Sunday, June 30th, which, if my calendar is all right, these are we're entering the slowest 2 months of the year in terms of daily traffic for congestion pricing through Midtown Manhattan, south of 60th Street. What's your take on this? Do you feel strongly still that this is a good thing? There are a lot of people, including, city workers, firefighters, all those people, police officers who have to go there or come out of there if they live there. They're going to be paying for this, and they're not getting any break either. So a lot of people are pretty ticked off, as you well know.
I can't blame people. Anytime you have to pay an additional cost for something, no one is going to walk around and say, please charge me more, please charge me more. That's just not the reality. But let's be clear on this. Congestion is clogging up our streets, and it's impacting our economic outcome, and it is endangering our environment with the car traffic that we have. So the state determined to pass a law that state we will do a congestion pricing. They turned it over to the MTA to determine how it was going to be done. This is not a city initiative from the mayor or the city council, which I would have hoped they would have done. Yeah. So the state made the decision. June 30th is law. We're going to follow the law. But we were able to fight and wrestle $100 million in those areas that's going to be impacted by the traffic, both environmentally and the flow of traffic. We were able to look at low-wage employees. We were able to look at school buses, yellow taxis. We were able to fight for some things. And now that it's in place, there will be an analysis to see how to determine if any changes must be made. But this is the law of the land. Just as people push back when you are paying to cross bridges, there's going to be pushback. No one is going to welcome to have to pay something differently. I would have liked to have the mayor and the city council would have had the power, but that is not what the state determined, and I must follow the rules of the state.
There are people in New Jersey who I know you like and get along with, and some of them are your friends, who are taking the city, the MTA, I should say, to court. And I wondered what your thought was about this could possibly block it. And these are people that you call your friends.
Governor Murphy has been a great friend. Because of the governor, we've been able to win the World Cup finals. We came together, a real partnership. In New York and New Jersey and Connecticut, we're all neighbors in this region, and you must make the right determination. And no one can deny we have one of the best transportation systems on the globe. When you look at south of 60th Street, you have a cross-town train, you cross-town buses north to south. And so it's going to be in the court. I don't control the courts. The courts are going to make the final determination, and I believe that they're going to rule that some type of system should be put in place.
What's the impact going to be on the city, you think, of all this? Economically?
Well, it's an adjustment. This is something new. Economically, we're talking about almost $1 billion annually can be put into our budget to make sure we deal with the high capital costs that we're facing. It costs a lot of money to run our subway system, and you don't want to put the cost of that on the backs of our passengers. Yeah. And so you have to find creative ways of ensuring that is done. And so when you look at that $1 billion, we're talking about going after some of the capital needs that the subway and the bus system needs.
When we saw the Jonathan Dillers murdered earlier this month, There were a lot of people who thought finally we're going to have some movement here to reform bail reform. Is that possible? Is it still possible to happen in this state?
Well, I think you have to dig into the crevices. It's the discovery issue that is inundating district attorneys. A lot of cases are being dismissed because they don't have time to turn over the documents and paperwork. And second, we have to go after those recidivists. The person who shot our hero, Officer Jonathan Dillard, he was arrested 20 times. The person who was in the car with him was out on a gun charge, and he's back in the car where there was a gun found in the car.
Yep.
That is our problem. These are the recidivists, small number of people committing terrible things on innocent New Yorkers.
Final question, Mr. Mayor. We appreciate your time. I wish we could talk for an hour, but we don't have that much time, and I appreciate you giving the time. The final question, squatters' rights. We were all surprised when we did the story here at Channel 7 Eyewitness News. Dan Crowther, our investigative reporter, discovered all these problems, and I don't think anyone understood it. They were lumped in with tenants' rights, which is a very different thing. The city council is now going to have a weigh in on this. The state has changed the laws about all this. What's your take on all this, and where do you think it's going?
You know, these are the types of rules and laws and regulations that are really, you know, it's just not common sense approach to things. There is nothing that should allow someone to move into someone's home, stay there, don't have a right to be there, but they're hiding behind the laws and rules. Hats off to Councilwoman Areola, who brought this to our attention, and others.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be adjusted. That you cannot move into someone's home and think you're going to stay there. That is exploiting the tenant's right for your only self-greed. And we need to make sure that this law is modified and corrected, that homeowners are not experiencing this.
There you go. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for sitting down with us and giving us your insight.
Thank you.
And what you view going ahead. Could be an interesting rest of the spring and could be an interesting summer. I appreciate you being here. All right. Eric
Okay,
Adams.
thank you. Take care.
Have a good rest of your weekend, sir. Thank you. Speaking about squatters, you know, who knew there was a squatter problem until our stories hit the air? And because of that, New York State lawmakers passed and Governor Hochul signed a measure that actually changes the law for the better. But landlords still facing some challenges in getting their homes back through all of this. Can you believe that? With the latest, here's investigative reporter Dan Crowther.
While prosecutors arrested the man accused of squatting in her home, strangers are still living there. She says it's a complicated situation, and she's waiting to see how the new law is applied to determine what to do next. So, Adele, you're getting arrested right now?
I'm being arrested.
For what?
For being in my own home.
The video of her arrest has been seen around the world.
Never knowing it was going to get to that extreme, but if it took that to get to here, I'm okay with that.
When we showed up to interview Adele Andaloro outside her Flushing, Queens home back in March, we did not expect the accused squatters to show up, or that she'd be put in handcuffs for changing the locks. The charges were later dropped, and the Queens DA then arrested and charged the man accused of squatting in her home.
I've just gotten so many phone calls, so many emails, people letting me know that, people thanking me for putting it out there and letting the people know that this is happening every day. And to what extreme it can actually get.
But even though prosecutors charged the man and ordered him not to return to the home, they say he rented out rooms to other people. And Andaloro says they're still there.
The sooner I can get these people out, the better.
The bill is passed.
Since her arrest, lawmakers changed state law, giving police more authority to remove squatters who don't have a legal right to be there, instead of taking them to housing court.
I'm really proud that we can deliver for people like her and many others.
I'm over the moon about the change in the law.
But it's unclear what will happen yet in her case. The new law defines a squatter as someone who doesn't have title, right, or permission of the owner to be there. It's unclear if that includes people renting out rooms from an accused squatter.
So now I'm kind of just waiting it out for a couple of days before I take any action to see if there's anything I can do that maybe will shorten the length of the process for me now that the law has changed.
The accused squatter who was charged says he's innocent, claims he signed what turned out to be a bogus lease with an unnamed real estate broker. He'll be back in court next month. Dan Crowther, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
Well, this whole thing has been a scam, and we wouldn't have known it had Dan not gotten a tip and that changed everything, and it led to a change in the law, what reporters are supposed to do. Just ahead, we talk to our political team about everything, including the presidential races and the protests and more. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Up Close and our political team. ABC News political director Rick Klein and veteran political consultant Hank Scheinkoff. Gentlemen, we could talk for about 3 hours about what's going on in the state of this country, and we would run out of time. We don't have that much time, so let's just start. I want to first start with another world kind of version of what we're doing with politics. We have a former president who wants to be president again, who is just so filled with problems legally that he may get out of some of it, might not get out of all of it. What's the state of play with Mr. Donald J. Trump? Rick?
Well, what a remarkable couple of days it was last week to see him in court at the same time the Supreme Court is trying to decide, and there's other legal maneuverings around it. Look, I think he is likelier than not to not have to face a trial around his actions around January 6th before the election, which is a huge win for him. But I think he's also extremely likely to have to continue to face just an unbelievable swirl of legal messes that, yeah, Trump is at the center of the action, but this is not the kind of story he wants to be telling, and this is not the kind of messaging he wants. And he is forced uncharacteristically to be on the defensive. When he is in court, he's not happy. He is not in control. And I think that's part of his unhappiness. And the things that are being said about him are taking away a degree of his freedom as a candidate and a degree of his freedom to shape the messaging, which is the comfort zone that Donald Trump has known for 40 or 50 years.
And yet he shapes it sort of every day a little bit, Hank. But when he comes out, the lunch break, and then after when the breaks for the day, and says how cold it is and how terrible this is, and you know, Joe Biden should be in prison for the rest of his life. He said that this last week.
No, that's fairly insane. That's has no bearing in reality. But Donald Trump, if he goes to jail, come kind of like that for an overnight visit. Why? Would make for great television, would make for great news, and would get his supporters absolutely inflamed that their hero is being put upon by a New York judge.
So if his supporters say that, Rick, that's not going to change the meter here at all. But if some people say, hey, what are we doing here? That could change the meter a little bit, yes? In a tight race.
I think that's exactly right. You don't have to change that many minds. And I think it can flow in both directions. I think in a world where he is acquitted, I think that's rocket fuel for his campaign, and he can rail against the justice system, and he probably isn't going to be tried in the other cases that are out there before the election. He can make most of that go away. If he is convicted, we've seen it in public opinion polling that people say they're less likely to support someone who's actually convicted of a crime, whatever that crime may be. And I think the air around him, the aura around him becomes different if he is actually convicted. There is so much now riding on Alvin Bragg and this case in New York. What an irony it is that the case was largely seen as the weakest politically and legally, probably will have the most to say as to Donald Trump's legal and political future both.
It's interesting take, Hank. You know, he also, Mr. Trump, this last week went to a bodega. I don't ever remember seeing him in a bodega before. He's campaigning out there. He also went to a construction site, and then he said at the end that he thinks that he has a chance to win New York, which of course no Republican has done since Ronald Reagan ran.
Well, he has no shot to win New York. Logically, it doesn't happen for a Republican to win here. This is a much more blue state than it's ever been. The other side of it is he goes to a bodega and he goes to a construction site to reinforce his blue-collar credentials, which don't even exist, and to excite that blue-collar community that he thinks he's going to win, and he will, especially Latinos. You can see in the data that they're moving more so to Republicanism. Why? Probably a cultural values issue, probably a pocket issue, and certainly a migrant issue. All
right, let's talk briefly. We had about a minute left, gentlemen. I want to talk about President Biden and what he's done in terms of Israel and how he's campaigning out there in relation to Mr. Trump, who's stuck in court. Rick, you started off.
Yeah, look, he's definitely been able to flip the script a bit by being out there, but it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. He's got some college graduation speeches. Those will be very fascinating to watch, given the unrest on campuses. And he has real problems with his Democratic base when it comes to Israel, comes to social justice and racial justice. There's all the collision of issues that impact younger Americans who are more likely than not the core Democratic voters, certainly the voters that he needs, and how he interacts with them will be fascinating.
Okay, Hank, you got last word here.
The bad news for Joe Biden is the war. The good news is the students. Let them continue doing what they're doing. Who knows what will happen? People may want stability after a Trump trials, Trump tribulations, and chaos in the streets.
Okay. Hank, Rick, thank you for joining us once again. Appreciate it. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. And that's going to do it for this edition of Up Close. Champo with Joe Torres is next. If you missed any of today's programs, I'll post the segments on my Facebook page sometime tomorrow. And you can watch the show on our new podcast on any of our ABC7 NY platforms. Thank you all for watching. I'm Bill Ritter. And for all of us here at Channel 7 Eyewitness News, we wish you health and peace. And let's take care of each other.